Okay, it's great to see everyone here. Welcome. My name is Mark Wallum. I'm ALBA's Executive Director. And on behalf of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, I want to wish everyone a happy Pride Month. Thank you all so much for being here today. ALBA is very pleased to be co-sponsoring this event. And I want to begin with a big thank you to our partner, CLAGS, for their partnership in promoting, hosting, and conducting this panel discussion. They'll be speaking to you in just a minute. We'd also like to thank the filmmaker, our friend Andrea Weiss, for graciously sharing this beautiful film with us. I was very moved by it the first time I saw it and immediately wanted to share it with everyone. And I'm very glad after a few attempts that we're now able to do just that. So thank you, Andrea. ALBA's mission is to preserve the legacy of the volunteers who fought fascism in Spain. They were a diverse group, and they did indeed include LGBT individuals. Bones of Contention contains many important messages, but to me, as a gay man, what is pertinent today is the stark reminder and warning of what happens to us in fascist and authoritarian societies. Fascism is on the rise in the world today, and all of us, especially communities like ours, must be very vigilant in fighting it. To that end, ALBA would like to remind everyone that this is an election year. Please make sure that you register and vote. The film also centers the related and important issue of historical memory, and we want to say a special thank you to Emilio Silva, a longtime friend of ALBA, for joining us tonight from Spain. Thank you also to Theadora Williams of Hunter College for serving as moderator. Thea has a very important project going on to honor the volunteers, and I encourage her to tell you about that when she starts her moderation. Just a couple of housekeeping matters before we turn it over to Shaka. One is that this event will be recorded. If for any reason you do not want your image recorded, please turn off your video so that you're not seen. We encourage you to watch this in speaker view. We find it that you can watch it however you want, but if you, we find that speaker view works the best, and that's how we recommend that you watch it. On a related note, we love seeing you, but if you do get up and move around during the course of the event, we ask that you turn your camera off because that can sometimes be distracting to other members of the audience. We hope that you've all seen the film. If you have not yet seen the film, tonight will be the discussion, but the link will be there. The link that you've been sent will still be active for another 48 hours. So we encourage you to watch it within the next 48 hours. And also the heart of this, I'm going to turn it over now in just a second, but the heart of this is our question and answers. And we want you to start thinking about and formulating your questions and put them in the chat. We may not be able to get to all of them, please understand that, but put them in the chat as soon as you think of them, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. And now I want to turn it over to Shaka McGlotten of CLAGS, and after that it will go over to Thea to begin the event as the moderator. Shaka, over to you, and thank you, everyone.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for the introduction, and Andrea for the film, and everyone who helped to organize. So I'm here sort of doing two things. I'm both here as a panelist to discuss the film, but also representing CLAGS itself. I'm a board member of CLAGS. CLAGS is the Center for LGBTQ+ Studies. It is the oldest research, university-based research center in the United States dedicated to the study of issues concerning LGBTQ+ individuals and communities. We offer a robust series of public programming and conferences. We have fellowships. And if you are interested in donating to CLAGS, like many organizations like ALBA, CLAGS is one that depends on the participation of the communities that it serves. And I'm going to put a link right here. And if you have any questions about CLAGS, you can also find more information through the link.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Theadora Williams. I am a student, activist, and researcher at Hunter College, primarily focusing on the intersections of technology and sociological research. To that end, one of my favorite projects I've worked on has been creating Stuyvesant High School's Spanish Civil War archives, which are an online repository of student research biographies concerning the Spanish Civil War and Abraham Lincoln Brigade volunteers, as well as Comintern documents and other historical archival materials that are related. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists. Andrea Weiss is an internationally acclaimed documentary filmmaker and nonfiction author. Her books have included Paris Was a Woman, Vampires and Violets, and In the Shadow of the Magic Mountains, the Erica and Klaus Mann story. She is also the filmmaker and director, writer and director of Bones of Contention, which is the documentary we are here to discuss today, which dives into the historical memory movement in Spain and the very buried and unknown, well, both figuratively and literally, story of LGBT repression under the Franco dictatorship. Emilio Silva is a journalist and president of the Asociación para la Recuperación de la Memoria Histórica, in English, the Association for the Recovery of Historical Memory, the aim of which is to locate and identify the victims of repression during the Francoist regime and the Spanish Civil War. Emilio is the recipient of the 2015 ALBA/Puffin Award for Human Rights and Activism. Finally, we have Shaka McGlotten, who was just on the screen, who is a professor of media studies and anthropology at Purchase College, SUNY, as well as the chair of the Gender Studies and Global Black Studies program. In addition to being a board member of CLAGS, they're also the author of Dragging, or In the Drag of a Queer Life, and Virtual Intimacies, Media, Affect, and Queer Sociality. They are also the co-editor of the two edited collections, Black Genders and Sexualities, and Zombies and Sexuality. And with that, I think we'll begin the audience Q&A.
Well, if people are formulating questions, I have a few words I can sort of say to maybe kick things off if you want me to. Because so far I don't see any questions coming up. So if you don't mind, I will take the floor. I wanted to thank ALBA and CLAGS for hosting this event and bringing us together, and also thank Emilio Silva for joining, and also for being in my film, because he's a really important voice in my film Bones of Contention, and I appreciate his participation. So for those of you who've seen the film already, you've probably noticed it's weaving together three different narratives, and if there are going to be questions about it, I'm sure there are going to be questions about that. The first are the questions surrounding the missing remains of Federico Garcia Lorca, Spain's most famous poet, who was murdered by a right-wing firing squad in the early weeks of the Spanish Civil War. And his story, the way I see it, is his story provides the narrative spine for the whole film. The other threads are the little-known story of the grassroots historical memory movement in Spain, well, little known, I think, in this country, which is working to locate the remains of more than 120,000 people who disappeared during the Franco regime. My sense is that LGBTQ history can serve as a site of resistance against official national narratives. And so because of that, the film, for me, had to go beyond the historical memory movement's fight for justice for the disappeared. I also needed to learn what happened to the LGBTQ community under Franco and place that story in a larger human rights struggle. And that was not an easy history to uncover. It's not written, it's not really documented in any way. too many people kept silent for their entire lives and were reluctant to speak. So because of that, I'm especially honored that those who do appear in my film trusted me with their stories, especially on a topic, I think Emilio can address this, especially on a topic that's still so difficult and painful to discuss in Spain. So just to sort of sum up, I want to say that while the film looks at the unique situation of Spanish history, I hope it encourages audiences to think about the connection between far-right nationalist ideologies, which, as Mark mentioned, are certainly on the rise again today, and their emphasis on gender and sexual control and on heteronormativity. So I guess my film doesn't really provide answers so much as provoke questions. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions myself, which is, how does a nation deal with its traumatic past? What testimonies should be included in our national discourses? How do these alternative narratives play a critical role in the collective process of healing? And can we even have a functioning democracy without an honest search for truth and justice towards historically repressed groups? So we'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks to the panel, to the person in the chat who mentioned giving introductory remarks, because actually that was our order of show. We just forgot it. So Andrea, thank you for that, for those remarks too. I think for me, as a scholar of queer, as an anthropologist and a scholar of queer media, what is most striking about the film are the ways that the contours of fascist, authoritarian, and totalitarian thinking and politics recur over and over in the same ways. And the fascination and fixation in these ideologies on gender and sexuality as key sites of controlling not just populations and their reproduction, but also controlling narratives about what kinds of lives and what kinds of futures are possible for people, I think was really powerfully demonstrated by your film, Andrea. I think especially the way that you've interwove these narratives, where the question, as you say, it isn't about providing an answer, but about showing the ways that queer lives are always present, the ways that queer life has been disappeared, and the different kinds of efforts, to recover queer pasts, which is not unique to Franco's Spain, but is something that we can think about even more broadly. So for me, the themes around memory, recovery, and healing are really powerful to think with now as we see the rise of authoritarian movements, including in our own country. As we see these on the rise across the world.
Emilio, would you please give an introductory remark as well? Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thank you to ALBA for the invitation. For me, it's difficult to speak English. I hope you can understand me. I am a member of an association fighting against the impunity in Spain. We are looking for missing person, and we are looking for memory politics in our government. And in the question about the LGBTI collectives during the Franco's regime, they have a lot of problems. And at the beginning of the democracy, after the Franco's death, we have in Spain an amnesty law, but the law forgotten the LGBTI people in jail, in prisons. No, they were left of the amnesty law, and they have to wait some years to recover the freedom and go out to their normal lives. No, now in Spain, somebody put in the chat I am very surprised because Spain is a great country about tolerance. No, now we have a debate about a new memory law. No, and this law again forgot these people. No, they only say they are victims, but they don't look for them justice, truth, reparation. No, the law only want to say, okay, you are a victim of the Franco's regime, but I am a democratic country, a democratic government, and I don't want to give you any reparation. No, and these people have to wait perhaps some years more for a real reparation. Some of the people in the film of Andrea are very poor people because they don't have an official laboral life. No, they were working in black markets, in prostitution, and they don't have a pension. They are very, very poor people, and they're waiting for the Spanish government to have some pensions, to have a dignity life, no? And they are waiting 45 years after the Franco's death, they are waiting for a small reparation, no? The minimum reparation for them. And in the project of the law is not the reparation for these people. And perhaps we have to wait, we don't know how many times. And some people are talking about what happens with the bones in the graves, no? I read somebody say, when I watched the film of Andrea, I thought I prefer left the bones in the graves, no? But if we are talking about crimes, we cannot decide to leave the bones in the graves. The police, the justice have to go to the graves and look for the bones, no? We went to Argentina in 2010 to open a juridical process against the Franco's crimes. We have to fly 12,000 kilometers because the Spanish justice don't want to say nothing about the Franco's crimes, no? And in the film, you can see this problem, no? Including the problem and the debate about Lorca. What happens with the Lorca's body? He's a missing person. Somebody detain him, kill him, and we don't know where is the body, no? And during 20 years, we help the relatives to look for missing persons. No, we opened more than 160 mass graves in different parts of Spain. We have near 3,000 graves in all our country. No, people fighting to defend the democracy. No, and in this country, in my town in Madrid, I have a big monument dedicated to the victory of Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini, near the residence, the official residence of all the presidents of the Spanish government from 1977 to today. No, any of the democratic presidents who pass near this monument every day to go to the center of the town say, I have to destroy it, to change, to finish this monument, because this monument say that kill thousands of people defending freedom and democracy in Spain was a victory for my country. And still today, my country is celebrating this victory. And we have to finish with this celebration. No? And I want to say thank you to Andrea, because sometimes the look of one person outside from Spain is very interesting for us, no? Because we are living in a very poor democratic political culture in Spain, no? We have a lot of streets, monuments, silence in the scholar books. 4 months ago, we listened from the government for the first time that in the scholar books will write the coup d'etat from 18 July 1936 was a coup d'etat. They discovered that was a coup d'etat. And I asked, during 45 years, what happens with the scholar books? We have silence, they have bad information, they are hiding the crimes of the fascist people in Spain, no? And I think one of the most important places to take the memory is in the scholar books. And the president of the Madrid Autonomous Community 2 days ago went to the court to fight against the possibility to include new information about the Second Republic and the Franco's regime in the new scholar books. The right parties have a cultural war in Spain, and they want to keep the silence and the ignorance of the people, no? And I think the films like the Andreas films are very important to see what happens here. I'm sorry, perhaps I talk too much. Thank you.
Hello, I apologize for forgetting to ask for introductory statements from the panelists. But to actually start the Q&A, first I'd like to call on Raquel Solomon. Please ask your question and I'll direct you towards Emilio.
Hi, how are you? My question is, knowing all the brutality of Franco's regime, why was the Catholic Church so willing to go, it seems like completely along with Franco?
I ask, I answer, or no, we have still today we have a church, a Catholic church with a lot of power. The new text of the future law of memory don't have the expression Catholic Church. I don't know why they don't be in Spain, no? When we start the exhumations in 2000, 6 years later, the Catholic Church published a document, a reflection about the situation of the moral situation of Spain. And they talk about the people looking for missing people from the Franco's repression, no? And the Catholic Church said, we arrived to the solution in the Spanish transition, and we have to left the past quiet, no? In November 2006, 2 months later, the Spanish Catholic Church announced the biggest beatification of the Catholic Church in the world, about 492 martyrs from the Civil War, no? They want to say the Republican families have to leave the past, but I have to make propaganda with this past, no? And the law forgets the Catholic Church. They don't want to create problems or to have problems with the Catholic Church in Spain. They have, still today, they have a lot of public money. They have teachers in the public schools with no opposition to be teacher. They don't have, they only need the finger of the obispo to be teacher in the public schools in Spain. And they have a lot of power, and the government don't want conflicts with the Catholic Church. But they, in many small villages, the priest wrote the names of the people that today are in mass graves, no? They say, they decide the life or the die, no? And they have a lot of power, but any government want conflicts with them.
Thanks for answering.
Thank you for both the question and answer. Moving on, I'd like to call on Barbara Klein and direct it towards Andrea.
Yes, hi. I watched the film and I was just so enthralled by it. My sister is a global human rights activist, so I immediately emailed her about it. And she's going to watch it tonight, but she emailed back to me about the other countries that are now in the process of digging up bones and discovering the graves, the unmarked graves of people who suffered through their own fascist governments. And she mentioned Guatemala and Argentina, where they're using DNA to discover the lost children. And in Guatemala, a friend of hers was able to find the grave of her grandfather and make sure he was buried. But my question is, was it the inclusion of Lorca that makes this so unique, and that you chose Spain because you felt that would enable the focus on Lorca would allow you to bring up all the other issues that you include in the film?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, there are many, many places this story could be set. And, you know, in our own country, we're not great at looking at our own past, coming to terms with the legacy of slavery in this country, so many things. I mean, there are many places that, you know, this whole kind of denial of, you know, alternative narratives that have been repressed could be told. In my case, it was really kind of, I mean, when I make a film, I really feel like the film finds me more than I find it. You know, the film found me because I was living in Barcelona in 2011 and 2012, and I kind of stumbled upon it was part demonstration, part vigil for historical memory in the old quarter of Barcelona. And it piqued my curiosity, and I especially piqued my curiosity because it was the year of huge worker strikes, you know, bank crisis, really contemporary issues, student tuition hikes, things like that. And here was this group of people so passionate about something that happened in the past. And I'm a historian by training. I'm actually a historian, I think, first by just natural inclination and later by training. And it appealed to me, and that was the beginning of it. And I love the way Lorca as a symbol had been a kind of symbol, both for the historical memory movement and for the LGBTQ movement, which were very separate movements, but he kind of was this figure that people claimed, and I loved his work. So it wasn't that I chose Spain over Chile or Argentina or any other place. It was that, you know, filmmaking, it's not really the same as like writing a scholarly book. It kind of creeps into you in a kind of non-rational way, in a way. It's kind of just grabs hold of you and demands you give it your attention. And that's what happened with this film. But I'd say many more films should be made, not only in other countries that haven't been looked at, but also in Spain. This is just, you know, this is just one.
Well, I had my own encounter with the civil guard in the late 70s in Spain, where we were stopped in the middle of the night at a roadblock in the pouring rain. And when they realized that they had a car full of 3 lesbian Americans, they actually pulled us aside. We had these, you know, automatic rifles pointed at our heads and searchlights. And it was only when I noticed where his other hand was in his pants that they started laughing and let us go. But the reason I'm mentioning that is I had no idea, because of this silence, what we were facing or what the risks were traveling in that country. And I think that's the other consequence of silence.
Yeah, can I just, I don't mean to take over Theodora's role here, but I just want to jump in on a question that someone named Nancy Bishop asked about the complicity of the US and the UK. Can we just jump over to that for 1 second? Because it's not just the question of I mean, it is a question of the complicity of the US and the UK. I mean, the only countries, Amelia, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only countries that came to the aid of the Republic were Russia and Cuba. And maybe not Cuba, just Russia, because it was too early for Cuba. So, so yeah, we let that happen. But I think in my film, I think the even maybe bigger or parallel crime on the part of the United States is that we bolstered up the Franco regime. We didn't just kind of like let it be. You know, I think there was a crisis during Franco's regime where the country was very poor and there was a fear that, you know, he could be overthrown. And the United States came in there, opened up tourism, opened up trade, and really bolstered Spain financially to enable Franco to continue. So we definitely don't have clean hands in any of this.
Thank you both for the questions and answers and further elaboration. For the next question, I'd like to call on Chris Schwartman and direct him towards Shaka McGlotten.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think I typed my question in there, right?
Yes, you can read it, or if you'd prefer, I can.
I'll just go ahead and read it because I'm not looking at it right at this minute. So go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. I see it. Yeah. So does the film suggest that in America we are already moving into the same kinds of repressive ideologies that authoritarian leaders could use to imprison and kill LGBT people in America? I mean, can we envision this as a possibility here in America?
Sure. I mean, I think this is a question for Andrea in some ways, because the film isn't really looking to America in the same way, but as people were mentioning, as Andrea was just mentioning a moment ago, one could make a film about historical like violence and historical memory in many different places, and you would see many of the same patterns repeat themselves, especially when it comes to the ways in which LGBTQ plus people are othered. So if you look at the ways that in the United States, LGBTQ plus people have been treated historically, and also the ways in which in this contemporary moment, trans people occupy a very particular place in the rights kind of imaginary, then absolutely. You know, if the Texas governor is basically enabling anyone to report anyone who might potentially be trans, and it's criminalizing someone's existence. And I think one of the things to keep in mind, I think for me, in thinking about like, well, what isn't fascism? Because some people don't like using that word to describe this contemporary moment in the US or other places. And they say, you know, it has to be exactly what it was in Mussolini's Italy or you know, Hitler's Germany or Franco's Spain. And I would argue against that. I think that we have to understand the basic contours of it. And if you agree with this sort of more expansive sort of view of fascism, it is fundamentally kind of like, I think of it as anti-life, which is basically, if you're not a fascist, you can't exist. And you start kind of going down the list of the people who you would other in order to consolidate political power, economic power, and you would just sort of start clicking people off the list. You know, the famous you know, statement of, you know, first they came for the communist, and they came, you know, this is a playbook. You know, it's a playbook, and I absolutely think that we do see that, you know, playing out. And I think that what we have in the United States, like the ways in which the right has consolidated power, it is a white Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. That's the expression, the fascistic expression here is this white Christian, you know, ultranationalism or you know, you want to understand, which is basically, if you're not white and you're not Christian and you're not American, you're not, right? And this is what I mean by a politics of like anti-life. You know, for fascists, it's a zero-sum game. You know, if you're not in, you're out, and you're not in, so you're out. if that makes sense. So absolutely, I think that the bathroom, from the bathroom bills to the sports debates in sports, to the very, very, very targeted and just exceptionally cruel policies that are are being enacted in Texas, that we could see something like this. There's not, why not?
Not to mention there's already a history of it having been criminalized in the past.
Absolutely. The shock treatments occurred in the United States. Chemical castration occurred in the United States. The criminalization of
Sodomy laws.
The sodomy laws. Homosexual sex per se is only legalized in the in the 2000s, right? And I think 2003 court case that kind of gave granted gays and lesbians the right to have sex in the privacy of their own homes.
Thank you.
Thank you both for the very enlightening question and answer. I would like to step out of my job as a moderator for a little and add a little note to this. An interesting note, I think, from the film was the similarity between the pride movements, both in Spain and America, particularly the in-group fighting, because it was mentioned in the documentary that Sylvia was one of the original protesters. Well, funny, we've got one too. But one of the original protesters, and though originally they'd wanted to march in the front because of the unique intersections of oppression that trans people face, they were still put to the back to try and put a more respectable face to the LGBT movement, so to speak. And when the cop showed up, it was the trans woman, the trans man, and then like the gays, as they said, who came in to fight. But the trans women they're fighting on the front lines. And within the US, likewise, if we look at the history of Stonewall, in the name of assimilationism and respectability politics, trans people are often, and it goes on almost every year, there's a new argument about why trans people should be at the back of the parade and not in any way its face, because they're too out there. And I think in terms of how oppression even between and competition even between oppressed groups who should be fighting together can still happen, I just thought that was a very interesting note. Moving on to the next question.
Just quickly, if I could follow up on that. I think that has to do with the centrality, what you just said, Thea, it's like the centrality of gender, like this sort of fixation on the nation and the myth of the nation and reproducing the nation. And that's why gender becomes such a key site in battle, in these political battles, right? I think that whether it's abortion bans in Spain or the effort to do them now, it is fundamentally about forced reproduction, right? To force, if we're afraid that there are too many brown and black people in America, then the best thing you can do is to force people to you could force people to, I think they want white people to reproduce. I don't know if that would happen, but to reproduce that nation in this particular fantasy image.
Thank you for raising that point. There is so much to dig into there, especially how modern debates over trans kids usually tend to feature the deaths of Black trans women and adults, and then the possible future options of white trans kids as maybe growing up to be normal white American kids. But moving on to the next question, I would like to call on High Levy and direct you towards Emilio. If you want me to read your question, I can do that, but if you want to, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure quite much about the process. But the question to Andrea and also to Emilio, if he has any insight, there were a couple of references in the film about the UN putting pressure on the Spanish government for the search for the mass graves and the unearthing, if I remember correctly. And I was just wondering, there was no mention of the EU, and if the EU, as a condition of membership, has put any pressure on the Spanish government to do the same.
Emilio, I give that question to you.
Sorry.
Sorry for me, the listening. The EU is
You want me to repeat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the EU putting any pressure on the Spanish government in regards to helping find these mass graves and unearth them, or anything related to the fascist regime and history?
Okay. The model in Spain to look for the missing people now with this government is give some public money, subventions to some people to look for missing persons. No, for me it's terrific because we put from the state we put some money and we create a competition between the victims, and you have to have the best project to take the money and put out the public money the other families, no, and I think it's very bad, because if you are talking about human rights, you have to guarantee the human rights. You don't have to put some subvention for some graves, no. But our country don't accept any pressure from United Nations on a lot of human rights organization, no. They prefer this model because I think it's a cacique political model. This model say to the people, if this political party is in the government, some people have some money to look for the missing persons. If this political party is not in the government, these people don't have any public money to look for the people, no? My organization don't use public money. We don't want subventions from the government because we don't want to participate in this model, no? Because it's a perversion. O sea, you have to you is the same model that if I went to the Madrid attempt in 2004, there are 190 victims, and the government divide these victims in 19 groups and say, you have to present a project and I will want to repair 4 of the groups, no? This is the Spanish model today, no? And we are waiting and we are helping people 96 years old. They are waiting for 45 years. And this government don't want to create an institution. It's very easy to do, to create an office to attend the families, no? But they don't want. You only need some money and political volunteer, not to create this institution. It's our principal reclamation to the government. We have offices in all the provinces in Spain from the central government, and we hope some relative can go to the office to say, you are my government, you have to help me, no? But they don't want to talk about the truth. They don't want to talk about the crimes. They only talk about money to look for the graves. If you look at the Spanish newspapers, you can find a lot of information. In the title is thousands of euros to look for graves in Extremadura, Galicia, Andalusia. All the time talking about money, but my government never gave any reparation to the families, any euro to the families. For example, in Argentina, the Argentine government give $2,100 to the relatives of the missing person from the dictatorship in Argentina. In Spain, the relatives of these missing people don't have any reparation, any reparation. They only have silence and monument celebrating the victory of Franco. It's very sad, but still today we have this situation, no? And in 2002 we start to work with the group of United Nations about missing people. They came to Spain in 2014, and the Spanish government look to another place. They say you have the obligation to look for the people. And the Spanish government said, we have all the reparations during the Spanish transition. We don't have problems with the past. And this is the question in Spain. Any government want to break the pact of the silence during the transition, the pact of the impunity. Nobody wants to break this deal, no? It's an iron law, and nobody wants to break this iron law. And the people are dying, and my society are forgetting, because the information about the mass graves is not in a document in a military archive. It's in the memory of one person in a small village, and these people is dying, and we never find a lot of people missing, no? People defending democracy, no? And including 2 years ago, the Spanish government take the bones of Franco from the Valley of the Fallen and put the bones of Franco in another public cemetery. I pay with my taxes the tomb of the dictator. My family was destroyed by the Franco's repression, like thousands of families. And those families have to pay the tomb of the dictator still today, no? It's another aggression to the victims, no? I can understand that in Germany, in Portugal, in Italy, the people have to pay the mausoleum to the dictator. But in Spain, every year, we have to pay, still today. It's very sad, but we have to fight against.
But can I just jump in, Emilio? So I finished the film in 2016, released in 2017, then a more progressive government came in. I thought there could be some change starting then. Did nothing change?
They recovered the money for the exhumation through the subventions, no? But for example, we discovered that some torturators from the Franco's regime have special pensions in Spain, special pensions. And the most famous died 2 years ago, Billy El Niño, with a big pension because he made during the Franco's regime extraordinary services. And with this government, these men die with the condecoration of the transition and with more money in the pension. No? And we are waiting for this question, but nobody wants to break the iron law of the Spanish transition, no? And I don't know, perhaps organization like my organization, we are building a bridge, and perhaps the next generation have to cross this bridge, no? And repair very late some questions, no? But it's very sad because the most of the people die waiting for the democracy, no? The democracy moving the face and looking at the victims and say, I know you are a victim. I know I have to repair your damage, no? But this government is not here still today.
Thank you, both to all three of you, that really went into how not just the history's been buried, but the criminals and the people who committed atrocities have gotten pensions. For the next question, I'd like to call on Joanna B. And for this one, I would like to direct it both to Andrea and also to Shaka, because I would like to see how you both think about this, especially in terms of, for Andrea, more speaking with people who actually went through it, what was happening, and Shaka's thoughts on the modern day updates.
I guess I can be heard, right? My question was, at the very end of the movie, there was a very happy statement about the present state of tolerance in Spain for gay, lesbian, transgender, everybody. And it seemed to just come out of nowhere. Suddenly, Spain is the most tolerant nation in all of the EU. Why? How? What happened? You know, the church is still there. The people are the same. I found that kind of odd. So I wondered if they had anything to say about it, that it beats out, you know, the northern, you know, countries like Sweden. I wondered about that statement. Any background?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying, you know, tolerance is like a double-edged kind of word, right? I mean, now when people are so intolerant, tolerance is actually looking pretty good, but it actually was never a goal, was it? Anyway, but this is what I found when I was, you know, in the big cities in Spain, in Barcelona and Madrid, when I was there in the, you know, in the sort of, I mean, the film was finished a while ago. Haven't really kept up exactly with the situation. I'm sure in small towns, it's far from the case. And I have a kind of, I have a feeling about it. I can't even call it a theory because it's not researched or anything. It's just kind of a sense that I had from talking to a lot of people, which is there is a sense among younger people in Spain of really rejecting the values of the previous generation, the Franco era and the generation that came out of the Franco era, living under this kind of cloud that Emilio was talking about of, you know, this pact of forgetting, the pact of denial, that extended quite a while after Franco was actually dead. And then finally came the grandchildren, which is like Emilio's, the grandchildren's generation of, you know, kind of, you know, doing a U-turn, doing an about face and rejecting a lot of those values. I think it takes time. And I think it was when it finally, this generation came of age, not everybody, of course, but a lot of people just really, really, you know, Spain was no longer cut off from the rest of the Western world, and other ideas were coming in, and people really just said no more. They didn't, that was it. They did not want to perpetuate those values. Now, I can't say that's like based on any research. It's really like an informal sense that I had of, I lived there in Spain for a couple of years. I was talking, I mean, obviously the people I knew, people I spoke to, the people who appear in my film are pretty exceptional people. They're not necessarily, you know, the average person on the street. But I think that has something to do with it. I mean, maybe Emilio could give a more, you know, reasoned answer, because it's really just my impression.
I think in the last years we have a very difficult change in the young people. No, now from 2019 we start to receive emails from teachers of the secondary schools talking about the fascist behaviors of the pupils when the extreme right party votes arrive to the institutions in Spain. No, and I think now we are living a very difficult moment, you know, because it's possible that in some months we have this extreme right party in the central government in Spain. And in the last months, I was in some secondary schools, and I remember in one of them, one teacher asked me, "What's your opinion about that some pupils of this school pass near the history department singing El Cara al Sol?" Is the fascist song in Spain, no? Young people, these songs, the teachers don't listen these songs in the secondary school a lot of years ago, and then they start to listen. No, they start to have some problems about the LGBTI people in autonomous governments, no, because Vox is arriving to Andalusia, supporting the government. Now he's in the government of Castilla-León, and is growing and growing. And we have perhaps to confront an intolerant government in Spain, like in Hungary or Poland. This movement is growing in Spain, and they have a cultural war about the past. No, 1 month ago, a group of universities in Europe make a research about the relationship with the change in the narrative of the past and the populist parties in Europe. No, and they are constructing a new narrative. When we opened the grades, we saw the crimes of Franco. We don't have the possibility to take the criminals and put them in prisons in the courts. We don't like for the Spanish elite, but we don't have the possibility to create big problems. But now we have a reaction, no? A reaction in the right parties, and then they are fighting for the scholar books. They are fighting. We have a battle in the scholar books in Spain, no? Because they want to control the information about the Franco's regime and the explanation of the civil war. No? 1 week ago, I was watching a wonderful film of the Fox company from US during the Second Republic. It's a very beautiful film about the new rights in Spain during the Second Republic. This film was hiding behind the sale of a house in the south of Spain, and we in Spain used to listen about the strong violence during the Second Republic, no? And we never see this kind of pictures with the new rights. Opening the Casa de Campo in Madrid was a very big park, only for the royal family until 1931, and it's very wonderful when the Republican government gave the park to the Spanish people, no? It's open, and we never saw this kind of films, no? And we now have this movement to intolerance, and the tolerance could be danger, because you can be tolerant with good things, and you can be tolerant with bad things. Near to Madrid, we have a bishop in Alcalá de Henares, the place when was born Miguel de Cervantes. These men organize courses to cure homosexuality, and these men have public money. These men have subventions, and they don't have any problem to organize this kind of courses. No, any government want to say you cannot do this kind of courses, and then I think we have it's like the bad and the good cholesterol. We have a bad and good tolerance, no? And we have a problem with the bad tolerance, because we can have the same gender weddings in Spain from 2008, but we have still to do this kind of courses. And these people who organize these courses have public money from the government, no? And now I think we are living a very difficult moment, no?
I know that we're about to end, and I'll just add just one thing to this, and then I'm I'm done. I think that, Emilio, what you said, I think, is so important, and Andrea too. I think tolerance wasn't a goal; it was, to live a life, and that Emilio points out too that things can go back both ways, and that this is not, we're not moving in a linear or progressive, like a linear and progressive direction. That there's constantly this battle over and imagined around the past. And, I think it's also always important, to think about how these global rights movements circulate. When you see pride flags in Spain, this is the result of, decades of organizing and of work, but it also kind of disappears the indigenous, Spanish, queer traditions that were already there. It becomes sort of a globalized formation. But I I know that we're at time and I want to respect that. So Andrea, I just want to thank you again for the film, and Emilio, I learned so much from you from the film and also from you tonight. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank everyone for all of their great questions.
Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and we are out of time at this point. But thank you everyone for being here. But most of all, I'd like to thank you, Andrea, Shaka, and Emilio. You've been really enlightening, and this session has been delightful. So with that, I think this ends it.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Y que no pasen.